And again, it goes back to G. Edgar Griffin's doc called The Capitalist Conspiracy. He breaks it down: pressure from above, pressure from below, in order to have us beg for martial law, which will be a basically throwing out of our Constitution and a whole new system being thrown in. And once they seize power, they never give it back, ever. I'm pretty sure that California still has COVID protocols in place, which supersede any kind of rights we have. And nobody
Yes.
cares. Nobody cares. And then you just start seeing the slow implementation of these kind of like political activist judges in positions to allow things to pass that shouldn't be passed. And once you set a standard or a precedence, now you're in deep trouble, because now that precedence can be used over and over and over again to again start to chip away at our civil rights.
No, no, and that's why, in this book, which is basically the third volume of Hidden History that I've written. Skyhorse for some reason doesn't like me to use numbers, so this is basically Hidden History 3. But when you look at it, the past is prologue, like Shakespeare said. The Bible said nothing new under the sun, and you can see we didn't get where we are today by accident. We got there, if you look back in history and watch all these things, because over and over again our leaders chose the wrong path. Now, do they do it just because they were stupid or wrongheaded, or it's because they have an Illuminati or something over them that's directing them and making them take that wrong path over and over again? But you mentioned precedents. That's very important. That's why I write so much about Lincoln. Lincoln, it says something about your society when the greatest tyrant we've ever had there's not even any competition. He was the greatest despot we ever had, is considered the secular saint of your civilization. And that's where we are now. So if you look at all the precedents Lincoln set, if, let's say, for instance, the January 6th people, I've had so many people on my show. I had Ashley Babbitt's mom on a couple of times. It's pathetic what's happening to these people. They've been denied all due process, given draconian sentences when they go to court. If you had an ACLU today was like it was when I was, a card carrying member, they would be outside the courts. They'd be petitioning the court saying this is absurd. It's a violation of their civil liberties. You can't have this, denied all due process. You'd have people like Mark Lane that were those kinds of lawyers that would be working on these cases. But you don't have that anymore. If you did, the government would simply cite Abraham Lincoln. They say, wait a minute, this is the Abraham Lincoln had an insurrection and Joe Biden had an insurrection. So they dealt with the same way. He set the precedent. Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus. He threw thousands and thousands of people in jail. We don't even know how many he threw in jail, including, this is a story from American history people all know. One of the people he threw in jail was Frank Key Howard, who is Francis Scott Key's grandson. And he put him, I think he did it on purpose to make a psychological point, put him in Fort McHenry, the exact same fort where his grandfather wrote the Star Spangled Banner as he's looking out the window. And he put that guy in there as a political prisoner. How many Americans how many people you think know that? They don't know. That's why I try to write these to try to illuminate people. You don't know anything about your history. This is hidden history, and that's your hero. Lincoln shut down over 200 newspapers. He was arresting people in church. He arrested a congressman, Clement Vallandigham, in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. The Union troops busted into his home. This is a congressman, and took him off. And the guy wasn't a Confederate. He was opposed to Lincoln's war. And there was the people in the North were saying, there's a better way to do this. Why are you're going to kill? And they did almost kill almost 1 million people. This is senseless. We don't want this war. Plus, you suspended the writ of habeas corpus. You shut down 200 newspapers. And when you make that guy, he's in the Republican Party, loves him today. I try to tell them that you make that guy the secular saint of your civilization. That says a lot about your civilization. And again, you look at people think of him. I hear so many conservatives say, "Well, yeah, Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln." No, there's it's like an IQ test. What in there doesn't match? Lincoln hated the founding fathers. He really hated Thomas Jefferson. I've got lots and then Thomas Jefferson would have hated him. So he did not come to continue that. He overturned the revolution. Before the Civil War, the United States was always referred to in a plural. So the United States are. After the Civil War, it's been singular ever since. The United States is, and that's a tremendous transformation. And again, people, they don't realize what happened. Not only did almost 1 million people die over that, but this was so much was lost, and the country has never been the same. He created the first imperial presidency. He set all these precedents, and so now you have, to this day, you had even George W. Bush, his lawyer John Yoo, cited Lincoln's precedent when to justify the torture of prisoners at Abu Ghraib. So I mean, that's he's still poisoning the well all these years later. So I keep going back to him because I think people need to understand how wrong they are about Lincoln, and this is the last guy you should be worshiping.
So we shouldn't be mad that they suddenly made him gay. We should actually be happy about it.
Well, I don't think. Well, and he probably was. In Crimes and Cover-ups, I published, there was an article. Uh, his law partner was William Herndon, and William Herndon's the one that blew the whistle on a lot of stuff. Although he's apparently his lover, but he's the one that said that Lincoln hated Thomas Jefferson so much. And we knew he did, but because everything about him contradicted Jefferson's vision. But Herndon's family, to this day, they celebrate the fact that their ancestor was the lover of Abraham Lincoln.
What?
So I mean, and they openly say, yes, it's family lore. So and Lincoln was a flaming atheist too. Lincoln was, in his youth. The rumor is he felt so strongly against Christ that he wrote a rebuttal to the New Testament. And his friends, when he entered politics, they were concerned. Hey, Abe, this is going to destroy your career. Back then, we were still a God-fearing nation, so they burned it, supposedly. But he never let go of that. And if you look at what he did, he not only didn't care about slavery. He mentioned slavery in his inaugural address a couple times, and he said, "Hey, if I could free the Union, that's freeing a single slave, I'd do it." So that right there tells you the man waging the war wasn't fighting to free slaves. And then a couple years into it, he decides, well, I'm going to start invoking God. So then he starts blaming God for the war and say this is God's wrath because of slavery, and invoking the Almighty when he didn't even believe in him. So I don't mean to get too worked up about Lincoln, but he's not my favorite historical
mind-blowing,
figure.
dude.
Yeah.
Ryan Dawson came on a while ago and told us that, Lincoln isn't who we thought he is. And I'm just starting to realize that, all my heroes are dead. And not that, Lincoln was a hero of mine, but, he's always portrayed as this guy who fought slavery. And then you realize, man, that's so crazy. And then there's a family out there that their claim to fame is that their ancestor banged Lincoln. That's so nuts to me.
And in American Memory Hole, I have the Lincoln was a corporate lawyer. My boy Huey Long, that's my hero. Huey Long was famous for saying, I will never take a case against a poor man. Lincoln never took a case for a poor man. He always represented the railroads or corporate interests. Do you know, in this book, I talked about the case where Lincoln represented a slave owner against his runaway slave. Lincoln didn't represent the runaway slave. He represented the slave owner. This is the great emancipator. His record, even his name, Honest Abe. The reason they called him Honest Abe was the same reason you called a bald guy Curly or a fat guy Slim.
No.
Because it was indicative. It was so dishonest that his political opponents called him Honest Abe. People don't know this. They think, oh, this guy's great. He's walking around. He set so many horrible precedents. And then later, of course, it was built on by Wilson and FDR and down from there. But we talk in this books again. Chris Graves and Peter Seacosh helped so much with this. But we found out that FDR invented cancel culture in the 1930s. We give examples how back then, before social media, FDR was getting his critics before World War II. He was getting his critics fired from radio stations and newspapers and magazines. That was the media of the day. He had Hollywood in his hip pocket. And then later we find out, people hear about they know that they incarcerated the Japanese Americans in concentration camps. Right. And exactly. Well, it wasn't just that Japanese. They also incarcerated German Americans and Italian Americans, but because they're white, nobody cares, and they never got any reparations. And in this book, we show how the German Americans alone had, I think it was, I forget how many billions of dollars worth of businesses and properties stole from the United States, kind of an asset forfeiture thing early on. They just took, they did that to all the people they threw in the concentration camps. They took their houses, they took their businesses, and they never gave them back.
Oh, the Japanese, but they did to the
Yeah.
Germans too.
The
Yes,
Italians.
and Italians, all three, because we're at war with you guys. We're at war with Italy and Germany. We can't, we can't tell one crowd from another. This is the philosophy at the time.
So, there's a book out there called Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler.
Yes,
And they're very, very, very it lines. It just illustrates with receipts the connection FDR and Hitler had. They're like they both like FDR's best friend was like a confidant of Hitler, and they were connected.
Yeah, you're talking about Professor Anthony Sutton. He wrote Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, and I quote a lot from this book in his book Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. He also wrote Wall Street and FDR, but Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. Again, we detail on how American capitalism financed and was behind the Bolshevik Revolution. They were, some of the biggest bankers and corporate leaders. They were cheerleading on the revolution. They were there, witnessing it. They were rooting so hard for their supposed enemies. This is all a show, and people don't know it. They think that, and it was not an uprising. There were so few Germans. The leader Trotsky, the Russian leader, his real name was Lev Bronstein. He was from the Bronx, New York. They ended up with an ice pick in his head later. But these are the people that, and I think it's, is it Lenin? Stalin's, I think it's Stalin's granddaughter or something, is still alive today. And I have it in the book and I'd forgotten it, but she's some kind of an official somewhere. And she's as messed up as you would expect a granddaughter of, a totalitarian, bloodthirsty tyrant like that to be. But hey, she's welcome in our government. I don't know. Maybe Hitler's great granddaughter would be welcome if she was around. I don't know. But this is these guys are all connected. They really are. You got it exactly right, Sam, when you said these people. And Hitler was whisked away to Argentina after the war. That's all the evidence shows that, and they know that. And they basically, he was the designated loser. He was supposed to be the guy and that lost, and he played his role well. And I don't know why, because I do talk freely about Jews, but I think I'm pretty fair about it. But a lot of the people that support me, they're just obsessed with Jews. So I got a lot of Hitler fans. I got a lot of Hitler fans.
I can't stand these guys.
They love Hitler. So I kind of joke around with them and try to say, "Oh, that's your boy," and everything.
That's
and
your boy. It's your boy Hitler.
Crazy.
That's your boy Hitler. But the problem is we've been lied to. But that's why I try to say I don't try to evaluate any of these foreign leaders at all, because I don't think it's possible, because we have to look at it through the lens of our intelligence agencies, our dishonest state-controlled press, our court historians, which are the people I'm criticizing in this book, because the average court historian, they wouldn't pay any attention to me, because they would, and they can't answer everything I have is documented. So they would just ridicule me if they paid attention to me at all. But they're wrong on everything. But this is what they're propping up, this false narrative. It's kind of an overall narrative. And that's why even with the American people as dumbed down as they are, I think that's why they related so much to Trump's fake news thing, because it's kind of a blanket condemnation, because everybody knows they're being lied to. So when you talk about Hitler or the Holocaust or down to Fidel Castro and Saddam Hussein, any of these boogeymen, I don't know what to believe. I'm not trusting anything they say. I don't know. I don't think any of those guys were good, because I think they're all together in on it. But my books, what I show is, look, I don't have to like the Confederates or the Nazis, but that to show you what the good guys did. And that's my point, is we committed atrocities. And the subtext of this book is all the terrible things we did. I couldn't believe the foreign adventurism we had under Wilson. I think he invaded Mexico like 8 times.
What?
Back then? Yes, exactly. And you had I talk about what they did. It's the same kind of atrocity. The Philippines, they did horrible. Haiti, do you know, in Haiti, they were invaded Haiti, and FDR, the great liberal who was an actual racist. Most of these guys weren't racist, but FDR definitely was. And FDR, him and his buddy, his cousin, they had a they had a plan in Haiti because he was Assistant Secretary of the Navy then. Chicken Hawk, a World War I, cheerleader, but of course he wasn't going to, just like Lindsey Graham, he wasn't going to anywhere near war. But they get there, and their plan is they want to build and run a plantation in Haiti, an all black country. This was his fantasy. He had like a plantation fantasy, a fetish, and he, they never got to do it, but and then his cousin made some kind of ridiculous comment about one of the leaders of Haiti and how he's basically Jimmy the Greek type thing about his high thighs and how he must have been bred that. I mean, just ridiculous. And FDR liked the comment so much he was still sharing it with people at toasts and informal gatherings a couple decades later. So this is the stuff people don't know. We had a foreign adventurism and meddlesome policy even back then in the 1910s and 1920s. And it just, you can just look at a graph and you can see why we are where we are now, because that stuff happened and most of it wasn't even reported. It takes deep research to even find that this stuff was even going on. And not to mention the things that we were doing in these places, because if you look at, it's the same kind of things that we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan. They weren't playing soccer with decapitated heads like our troops did in, Iraq and Afghanistan, but it was the same kind of stuff. Yeah, they targeting civilians, raping constantly, and they had a huge grift going on in terms of stealing. And again, that goes back to General Sherman in the Civil War, where they had, I published that in Crimes and Cover-Ups, when I published a letter from a Union soldier, a guy named Lieutenant Myers. Best evidence you could get. Court historians would ignore it, but he's bragging about how much jewelry and property they've stolen on their march to the sea, and but he's complaining because he's saying, General Sherman, he has to take a cut of everything, so he's got enough gold and silver to open up his own bank. So that's great evidence because he doesn't have an axe to grind. He's just kind of bitching about why does he have to take a cut of it, but he's fine with them stealing everything. But that established a precedent. It goes all the way to World War I, World War II. I talked in my book about how they would send home skulls of Japanese to their family members, as a trophy, that kind of stuff. And the widespread theft has always been kind of an undercurrent with our troops. And that's why I say I don't know. The other side was probably doing bad stuff too, but whatever they were doing, all I'm saying is we weren't if you're proud of doing that stuff, if you're proud of targeting civilians and raping kids, raping women, burning homes, destroying crops. That's the kind of stuff we've done. I'm sorry, I can't support those troops.
And Sherman also has some of the worst quotes you'll ever see about black people. The black people in their trains that were behind them that were just looking for direction because, they were just liberated off of these plantations with nowhere to live, no resources at all. And he's got some of the worst quotes about just the kind of people they are. He describes them as like vermin, just parasites on his army as he's going through the countryside. Yeah, that guy had no love in his heart he was a pure soldier of fortune, just there for his own glory.
In fact, when some of the blacks, some of them tried to follow him on his march, he had his troops burn the bridges. Yeah. So they couldn't follow them. So he was so. But again,
he tricked like deceit. He used active deceit and then burned the bridges and trapped them there on the other side.
Yeah. So it's why again we just Americans that's why the subtitle of the book is how the court historians promote disinformation, and they do. And if Thomas Jefferson said at the time that the people that didn't read newspapers were better informed than the people that did. Because there were so many lies, it's better to be uninformed than misinformed, I guess. That's the way it is. The people that don't read conventional history books know more about history than those that do, because they're just reading. I mean, just from, they're still telling you Oswald killed JFK, 19 crazed Arabs with box cutters and plastic knives did 9/11. these are the same people. Why are you going to believe them about anything? You're lying about everything. You won't even allow John Wilkes Booth's family. I was in contact with John Wilkes Booth's great grandniece or something until she canceled me. I think probably over Trump or COVID. I don't know. But she was one of the people that I noticed, hey, God, I'm not friends with her anymore. But until then, I talked to her all, but her family had been trying to get his body exhumed because there's a question that was the real John Wilkes Booth that died in Garrett's farm. Okay, well, usually when you exhume a body, it's the family that determines that. If they want to do it, sure, go ahead, go for it. Not in this case, because it could solve a historical mystery, and so the National Park Service blocks it. That's how committed they are to these lies. If that wasn't John Wilkes Booth's body, what would that mean today? Americans would just shrug. They probably know who the hell John Wilkes Booth is, and most Americans. So it wouldn't mean anything, but they're so committed to the lies. And I'll give you better than that. Meriwether Lewis, you go back to, you're talking about over 200 years ago, the Lewis and Clark expedition. His family, again, I talked to his great grandnephew or something. They've been trying to get his body exhumed too. National Park Service blocking it because they believe he was murdered instead of killing himself. Now, if he was murdered, that would have no ramifications on the politics of today.
Yeah,
but they're
so interesting.